I've been fed the narrative my whole life because I was always a big kid that I had no willpower and no motivation, and that I was weak, and that there was something wrong with me. My drive to look better so that I could have confidence and feel okay with myself and to feel comfortable in my own skin had to be driven not from the external appearance, but from my internal self. If you look at how a bodybuilder eats, bodybuilders eat like a lot of protein, and they keep it really, really simple. And it's like the same thing every day.
Can you imagine being less than 10 years old, overweight, and being told that it's your fault, that you're too lazy, that you're overeating, that you're not trying hard enough to lose weight? That's what happened to our guest, Alex, who is now a coach, helping people to get their health back because he understands that if you don't have the knowledge about what food is healthy, of course you're going to be overweight. So, Alex, can you tell us a bit about how you got here?
I was very lucky that I discovered keto when I did. And even deeper than that, that I started to learn about sugar addiction when I did, because I was 27 or so, or this is a couple of years before that actually. I was living in Santa Cruz, California, and I stumbled across the movie, I think it was Fed Up on Netflix, and started to explain to me like, oh, there's sugar in those tortillas that you're eating, and in the bread that you're eating, and in everything that you've been eating since you were a child. And that kind of blew my mind, and I said, oh, okay, well, that's really interesting. I've been fed the narrative my whole life because I was always a big kid that I had no willpower and no motivation, and that I was weak, and that there was something wrong with me. And I believed it, and I internalized it, and I was my own worst enemy, and I didn't respect myself very much. And then I realized that maybe it wasn't really my fault. Maybe I wasn't bad. And so I started to learn more and more about that. And a couple of years later, because it took time before I could really, muster up the courage to make a big change, I stopped eating sugar. I just decided, like, okay, you know what? I'm sick and tired of feeling this way. Something's got to change. And it started to work really, really fast. And originally, I was just doing like, I was eating brown rice and kind of like complex carbs, and it was pretty healthy overall. And then I started to. A friend of mine was talking about keto and saying, "Oh, it works really well for big people that need to lose a lot of weight." So I started to do some research and learning about insulin and the role that that plays in uh, promoting fat storage versus helping us to, like, access those deeper stores of energy that are normally hard to get to when we rely upon carbohydrate. And it clicked, and I went keto, started learning about fasting, and I was dropping weight really, really quickly. I had no hunger, I had no cravings. So that was my introduction. Sort of started with buying into the idea that sugar is addictive and it shouldn't be in my body anymore, and then finding keto as an evolution of that to really optimize that journey.
You were, as a young person, being made to believe that it was all your fault that you were overweight. So it makes me wonder, how young were you when you were first overweight? Like, when did this start being a weight issue for you?
Oh, I'm sure I was really young. I mean, probably between the ages of 5 and 10, somewhere in there, it had become a problem. I'm still looking for those core memories. It's like, well, when did that really start? What caused that to happen? For as long as I can remember, I was just, I wasn't huge as a kid. I hadn't gotten as big as some of the kids that we see walking around now, fortunately. But I was always kind of like chubby, and then definitely by high school, I was very big, and definitely by 19, 20, I was like way too big, and by my mid 20s, I was like about to die too big, right? So it definitely spiraled out of control pretty quickly. And yeah, the narrative my entire life that I heard from every direction, especially my own, was that there was something wrong with me and I was bad, and if I had more willpower or tried harder or I was more motivated, then I'd be able to lose the weight and I could just get it together. But I've talked to a lot of people that are very big, because those are the people that I want to help the most. And they're extremely motivated. They're motivated to have the mobility to function and do things with their family. They're motivated to look in the mirror and be happy and proud of what they see and what they've been able to accomplish. They're motivated to be more productive at work and to be able to accomplish the things that matter to them. And they spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money trying to lose weight, and it just doesn't work. So I don't think that motivation is the problem. I think that the system is rigged.
Well, what I find even more insulting is that we're telling a 5-year-old they're not motivated to, a 5 to 10-year-old, they're not motivated to lose weight. when the 5-year-old doesn't buy the food in the house, right? Like I'm certain you didn't have access to food that you weren't given. So it's frustrating, I think, that that's the place it starts. But then in your teen years, what kind of actions did you take? Because they're telling you you're not motivated. So I'm assuming by the time you become a teenager, do you start trying to do the things that will help with weight loss?
Yeah, I didn't do anything too crazy or extreme, but I signed up for gyms and I tried to motivate myself to go to gyms, and I tried to wake up and like make food that wasn't, just grabbing something quick and convenient. All the kind of basic stuff that we are told works, but we're not taught how to integrate certain things into our lifestyle, or how to integrate certain things into our identity. And this is where most people struggle, is that there's a huge conflict between, I want to be a healthy person that cooks healthy stuff, makes homemade food for my family, but also like I'm a busy working parent and I don't have time to do that all the time. And then I feel like the kids are screaming and they don't want to wait till they get home. They want to stop at McDonald's, but I'm trying to be on a diet. And there's just a lot of conflict that makes it difficult to live in the modern world while also being a health nut, right? And so we also get very all or nothing, and we think that if we can't have the perfect meal prep strategy and home cooked meals, and never eat anything processed or fast food, that we can't do it. We can't be healthy. And a lot of us struggle trusting that we don't have to be perfect, because the scale bounces up and down like crazy, and it seems like looking at bread makes us gain 5 pounds. So we tend to doubt just the basic stuff that we know will work, and it makes it really hard to stick with it long term.
And also when the basic stuff we think we know is incorrect, like the breakfast things that you were waking up early to try to make for yourself, what were they in line with? What kind of foods are we talking about?
I think that I had the right idea even at a younger age, and I was fortunate that my grandma modeled some good fundamentals for me. And I think a lot of people's grandparents probably did, because for a lot of us that was the generation right before, like, sort of like the modern food industry really started to take over. Because my grandma would say, like, oh, like, just make have some scrambled eggs in the morning for breakfast, and then maybe like some oatmeal with blueberries, and then have like tuna fish salad with some mayonnaise and like chopped apple and chopped peppers and onions and stuff like that. And for dinner, like, oh yeah, just like make a nice chicken breast and put it on some brown rice with some salad. So it might not have been low carb necessarily, but I think she really had the right idea. And if you're not diabetic, all of that is actually totally fine, unless you're sensitive to grains or something like that. So I just took that general idea of like wholesome food and I ran with it. And that's what I did as well early on when I first started to really get the sugar out and try to lose weight. And it worked fine. I just wanted to upgrade it to keto from that point, because I was pre-diabetic. So my view on insulin was that it would work better if it was a very low carb diet. I think that a lot of people know how to eat healthy. Basically, we there's a lot of conflicting information out there, so sometimes we go back and forth. We get kind of overwhelmed, and it's called analysis paralysis, where perfection is the enemy of good enough, right? And we tend to nitpick things and get overwhelmed. But if we all basically just ate real food and didn't eat sugar, I think most of us would be really successful. It's just very, very hard to be consistent, and it's really easy to get discouraged, unfortunately.
I feel like it's also hard to be on track when we don't know some of the nuances of like what's healthy. So our grandparents had the benefit of not having the processed food levels that we had. So like it sounds like by the time that you really like stuck to doing the healthy foods that grandma was talking about, you were already diagnosed pre-diabetic.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I growing up, I'd been exposed to that a couple times staying over with her, but she wasn't the that wasn't my mom, right? So that wasn't the constant exposure. That was something that I had to, in my subconscious memory somewhere, it popped out like, oh, maybe I remembered somehow that, oh, I felt really good when I stayed over at grandma's house. Maybe I'll just eat what I ate over there. And it was never conscious to me until just now, but I'm guessing that's what it was. That's how I like gravitated towards that out of everything I could have done.
It blows my mind though, because I think that when we look at what our grandparents did, a lot of it was this, right? They, my father, my father always used to call that stuff like junk food. he would call it children's food. Like he couldn't put his mind around eating this kind of stuff. And I feel like my grandparents were even more like that. So what happens when we start doing the right thing? Your body started to react. And before you decided to do keto, how much did you lose?
When I first really committed, I was over 400 pounds. I was so big that the scale wouldn't even, it said like error because I was bigger than the limit on the scale. I think I'd lost maybe my first 20 pounds or my first 40 pounds by the time I started doing keto. And I was eating 3 meals a day, and I wasn't snacking, and I wasn't eating any dessert, and it was, just a big plate of whole food at each meal. Like it was like scrambled eggs, and then tuna salad, and chicken and brown rice, just like the most basic stuff you can imagine. And they also had the benefit back then of they didn't have such a gigantic variety of food, and so much processed food, and so much artificial flavor. So there was only so many things they could eat. It's like, well, we can eat eggs, like we can eat chicken. Maybe once in a while we can have a burger. We can do like bacon, and so they had a lot more protein and fat in their diet. They had vitamins, minerals, and fiber in their diet. And then the food industry really changed, and they took out the protein and the fat and the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals and replaced it with starch and refined sugar. It went downhill pretty quickly when everything changed, but before all of that took over and became so prevalent in the food supply, it's kind of interesting when you look at the types of foods people were eating before that, and they weren't afraid of the egg yolk, right? They would have bacon and eggs, and they weren't afraid of the fat. They weren't eating things that were in boxes and packages. It was like, if you think of like, the family dinner table of people living on a farm, what would that food be? It would be from the animals, and it would be from the earth, right?
When you gave yourself this new diet plan, so at the very beginning, were you struggling to not eat the chips and the cookies now? Like, was it, we get told so often that we can't do it because we have to eat these things, right? It's just normal to eat these things. How are you going to have fun without eating? So you're in this situation now where you're pre-diabetic and you're wanting to make a change. Was it hard for you to stop eating the cookies, ice cream? Was it hard?
I think it had been hard all of the other times that I had tried to do it. And this is when we talk about making a lifestyle change, I think that it has to go beyond that because your lifestyle can get disrupted too. You have the perfect plan and you have the perfect structure, and then work gets really busy, or if a reconsolidation of your entire value system. Because I had tried to go on diets and those don't work. I tried to even change my lifestyle and that didn't work because then like the family would move and things would get disrupted, right? When it really changed for me, it was because I kind of had to have a moment of reckoning with myself, and I kind of had to look in the mirror, so to speak, and say to myself, you fail because you give up every single time it gets hard. You fail because you have an incredibly low tolerance for frustration and disappointment. You fail because you allow whether or not the scale went down today to dictate your emotions for the rest of the day, which leads to you impulsively eating for comfort. You fail because you're not willing to put in the time or the effort to actually learn new things that feel complicated and intimidating because you're so afraid of the judgment of imperfection that you won't even take the risk of possibly messing up. And I had to be really honest with myself about all of these qualities within my personality that I didn't actually like, and how my self-esteem was not just wrapped up in my weight, but in the attributes of giving up on myself and feeling like I was stupid because I was intimidated by the pursuit of knowledge. And so that's when things started to reconsolidate, is because I finally looked at my drive to look better so that I could have confidence and feel okay with myself and to feel comfortable in my own skin had to be driven not from the external appearance, but from my internal self. And so I started to think in terms of, what do I need to do today so that I can feel proud of myself? And what do I need to do today so that I keep promises to myself? And what do I need to do today so that my decision making process and my priorities are aligned with the person that I've always wanted to be, and I'm not just a statistic, and I'm not just confirming what everybody has always said about me, that I just don't have any willpower and I don't have any motivation. How can I prove that they're wrong? And so when I started thinking like that, it wasn't that I couldn't have the junk food. It was that I didn't want it anymore. And that's the only way that we're ever going to be free from this stuff. Because when we have the competing priorities where it's like, on one hand, I love that food and it's so tasty and I'm missing out and it's not fair that everybody else can eat whatever they want and I can't, and I'm out at a restaurant and I just want a little bite, just one bite. But also I want to be healthy and like not die young, and I want to be here for my kids and I don't want to be in pain all the time. And so when those are competing, of course we're back and forth. Of course it's hard to stay consistent. But when you embrace the idea that I don't want this stuff in my system because it's directly in opposition to everything that I hold sacred, and it's not my friend, it's actually a thorn in my side, then you don't really crave it anymore. Because the way that I like to think about it is, if you take somebody's coping mechanisms away, that's all they have. They're going to go back to it. They're going to scream until you give it back, right? Like you try to take the safety blanket away from the child, they're just going to scream. But if you give them a new like stuffed animal, they'll drop the blanket and they'll go with the stuffed animal, and then you can throw the old smelly blanket away, right? It's the same thing with our eating. We have to replace it with something better. And for a lot of people, it's the life that they want at the end of the weight loss journey. That's the thing that really motivates them. But it's too far off. There's not enough instant gratification. And that's part of habit change, is actually having instant gratification to justify creating new habits. And so the life that we want has to happen now. The person that we want, the confidence that we want has to happen now, because that's the instant gratification that makes us focus more on doing the right thing than having the end result. That mentality shift was the big thing for me, was that instead of feeling like it was going to take all this work and all this sacrifice to lose weight and to exercise and to change how I was eating, and then finally someday, eventually, hypothetically, I'd look the way I wanted to look. It was more about doing the things that would make me the person that I wanted to be right now. And then a year passed and I lost the weight, and it was just a byproduct of the way that I was thinking and the way that I was making decisions.
I'm wondering about the fact that you learned during that process, because you started off eating healthy, like grandma food, and then you learn from your friend that, oh, there's this thing called keto, and by the way, did you know you've been poisoning your body all the time? Like all this data that comes in. And I wonder if that also sparks you to see that, oh, that lie that I was being told that this was all my fault, it was a lie, because clearly if the food was harming my body, then there was more to it than just I'm lazy and I'm not trying hard enough. And I feel like sometimes the things that we don't even see, like we don't give credit to maybe that change that happened there, but part of the process is all of the information, right? Like for people watching this video, I think it's important to have that North Star. It's important to have the immediate, like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to be proud of myself. But it's also important to know that those cravings I had weren't coming from nowhere. Like I was programmed with the food that was causing me to chase this stuff. And you found a way to reprogram your brain to say that even if I like the way that tastes, I like the way I feel more. And that switch is like, it's huge. It's really huge. And we see it in that, okay, so it took you 1 year to get to the current weight?
I went from 360 on January 18th, 2018, and by January 1st, 2019, I weighed 195. So it was 165 pounds in 11 months. And then I'd already lost about 40 pounds in a couple months before that.
Okay, so you just hit your 6 years.
Mhm.
That must feel amazing that your entire life changed by eating properly.
Yeah. And very little exercise. Barely even, I wasn't even walking very intensely. It was purely through food.
I think that's the other part of the story that people don't understand, because they kill themselves at the gym.
Yeah.
They feel like they have to. And so let me just be clear. Working out is important, but not for weight loss. It's important for health. But we try to kill ourselves in the gym to lose weight, only to turn around and be frustrated when we don't lose or when we gain, because we've been building muscle on top of the fat that's there. And I feel like sometimes we're still kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, right? We're still letting in these old ideas from calories in, calories out. And it blocks us from seeing the true value of the food you're eating matters. So let's go to that. The food you're eating matters. What actual foods became the staples for you?
So for me, I think it was really, really important for me to stop. And this also comes from a place of where I'm going to find my confidence and my self-esteem is not out there. It's not being told what to do. It's having the trust and the confidence in here that I can learn and I can make good decisions for myself. And so the approach that I took was I was no longer looking for like a meal plan or looking for like the next fad diet, which is ironic because people will say that's what keto was. The reason I think that I was so successful where other people that may have done more diets in their lives, because I'm a younger person. A lot of the women that I work with are 60 plus, and they've been on every diet out there their entire lives, and they've done OA for 34 years, and everything works in the short term to lose weight, but they always put the weight back on. They always feel confused and overwhelmed, and they become afraid of food. It's like food is the enemy. It's going to make me fat. And so I had to go beyond that surface level information that we tend to see. And I had to look at it from the perspective of like,
Wellness Warrior, I have a favor to ask you. In editing this video, I realized that sharing our stories is what will help new people to understand that keto actually works. So if you have improved your health, mental health, or weight through eating healthy keto, please look in the description. There's a form to fill out so that we can do an interview and you can share your story. I want to help more people, and I think that together we can help people to understand that keto is more than a diet. It's a way of life that gives you your life back. I'm not a special snowflake. I know that you also have lived amazing things. So let's change this together. The form's below.
And I had to look at it from the perspective of like, who is in shape and stays consistent? And it's people that are athletic, like weightlifters, people that are really passionate about this lifestyle. And what are the kinds of things that they're doing that I'm not doing? Well, like if you look at how a bodybuilder eats, bodybuilders eat like a lot of protein and they keep it really, really simple. And it's like the same thing every day. And so I took some of those concepts. It was like, how did my grandma eat? Well, it was just clean food and, quote unquote, clean food, whole foods that are not artificially processed is what I mean. And then I looked at keto, and there's like internet keto, American keto, and then there's like ketosis as a method of activating fat burning metabolism, right? They're two very different things. And so American keto, and this is where we get into the controversy and where it looks like a fad, is that you're eating tons of cheese and you're eating tons of bacon, tons of sugar alcohol so that you can have your keto cookies and all of that. And then we look at, well, what activates ketogenic metabolism is keeping your blood sugar and your insulin stable so that your body doesn't need to rely on carbohydrate and can function without it, which allows you to burn fat without like crashing your energy and needing to put carbs back in, which is what happens when you rely on carbs, is that you have a finite amount of carbs that you can store, and then you get really hungry and grouchy and you have cravings. And when you don't eat carbs, you can run on fat like for a very long period of time, right? So the idea is, how do we get ourselves to run on fat without everything falling apart? And this is the dilemma that makes it so hard to diet consistently and that doesn't make it sustainable, is that when you rely on carbs and when you have so much sugar in your blood, you try to diet by cutting your calories and burning off all that blood sugar at the gym. But then what happens? You get really hungry and tired and you have no energy, and then you need to restore your carbs, which causes like the roller coaster effect, right? I had to look at it from the perspective of, if I want to be able to diet, quote unquote diet, for a long time because I have a lot of weight to lose, I have to get my body to the point where it doesn't need the roller coaster. Like it's beyond the requirement for constantly refreshing my glucose, right? Eat a lot of protein, eat a lot of fats so that you're not hungry and you can fast all day long. Don't eat anything artificial, because the keto sweets and the cookies and all of this processed keto stuff, it's the same stuff that was making me fat in the first place. And it's going to keep the association and the value around fake food alive. Even if it's not sugar, it's still junk food. And they say that, they say to count net carbs, and that's a marketing gimmick so that they can sell you products, because all of these different things, there's an assumption that it's not going to have any impact on our blood sugar. But time and time again, when people cut out a lot of the processed keto stuff, they start losing weight all of a sudden. It's like, well, what do you know? I wonder what's going on there. So there seems to be a connection, And so just keeping it really simple, again, going back to like, how did people eat before processed food? And I think it works, if you're eating chicken and brown rice, it's kind of the same thing. And when you do keto, it's a little bit more efficient, I think. And in that case, you just have the chicken thigh, and the fat from the skin cancels out, kind of balances out the calories that you're not getting from the rice, except it's more stable because it's fat. So that sort of approach worked really well for me, and it works really well for the people that I coach as well, because they're typically a little bit more weight loss resistant than even I was, and they've got to cut back on the dairy, they've got to cut back on the sugar alcohols, and it starts to come off.
So just understanding what foods we like and eating the ones that are healthy is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it's whole foods with an emphasis, a heavier emphasis on protein than people are giving. Honestly, most people are eating maybe half as much protein as they should, and they're being told that protein converts into sugar, which is not how it works at all. So there's some kind of like myth floating around the internet that if you eat a bunch of protein and you eat too much protein over your limit, it's going to be turned into sugar in your bloodstream. So this is gluconeogenesis, which is the ability for the brain to convert protein into glucose. And the brain needs a little bit of glucose. And if it's not getting that from carbohydrate, it needs to get that from somewhere. And so here's what most people are not going to talk about on the keto forums is that, yeah, you can turn protein into glucose if you need it for your brain. You can also turn fat into glucose if you need it for your brain. And yet you guys are stuffing yourselves full of butter and oil and cheese and bacon. And so if you're going to avoid protein, why not avoid fat? Why not eat nothing so that nothing can convert into glucose? Well, that would be crazy. And so here's the thing. Your brain isn't going to turn every bit of fat and protein into glucose. And even if it did, it wouldn't be sugar in your bloodstream spiking your insulin. It would be immediately converted for use by the brain only as much as it needs. So people have this fear of protein, and protein is the single most important macronutrient next to water. It's more important than fat. You only need like so much fat to produce hormones, but you need a lot of protein all the time to rebuild the muscle that you're constantly breaking down. So I think for most people, especially women over 40 who are losing muscle mass every year, their metabolism is getting slower every year. We need to overemphasize the protein, underemphasize the fat a little bit. Carbohydrate that we do eat has to be like fibrous and nutritious rather than just like sugar alcohols and fake flour tortillas. And I think that's kind of the priority system around the food groups and around the macronutrients. And then within those priorities, you can have a lot of flexibility. You can do chicken, or you can do steak or burgers, or like whatever kind of protein you want, as long as you're emphasizing the protein, getting a lot of protein, getting fatty protein, and not doing processed food. And that's kind of if you can just do that, you can go a lot of kind of any types of meals, any types of cuisines or flavors that you like, as long as you're really emphasizing those principles.
I think one of the hardest things is that, especially for women who've been living in this time that we're in, we're so marketed to with diet this, diet that, and everything, of course, is processed diet. Because if we were eating real food, we wouldn't need it to be diet food, right? It's like it's very interesting that we are drawn towards buying packaged foods that have the word diet on it. And so, to your point, taking out processed foods, first of all, obviously, but I also wonder about what would happen if we allowed ourselves to recognize that this desire we have for the weight to come off now is part of the problem. Like, give yourself enough time to lose weight. You put it on over 20, 30 years and then want it off in a month, which is not realistic. So I feel like what I would like to know what process you use to help people to look more long term than that.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I do. So first of all, one of my one of my preferences, I guess, or it's just the way that I do things, is like when I work with people, I work with people for 6 to 12 months. And so it's not just a couple sessions at a gym, because I understand that you're gonna get frustrated. This scale is gonna stall. It's not gonna go down the way you want it to. And if you give up, like it doesn't matter if you work with me or anybody else, you're reinforcing and cultivating a quitter's attitude, which is exactly the type of personality trait that you don't like about yourself, that you want to get rid of. And when you lose the weight and you can look in the mirror and be really happy, you want to feel good about yourself that you achieved this thing that's been over your head for so many years. But how can you ever achieve that if the decision making process you have now is that you quit when you get discouraged or when the scale doesn't go down? Like how are we going to get to be if we hate the process of getting to be, and if we don't want to do it? And so we do a longer term thing so that we can get over all of that discouragement. So that's a foundational thing of just how I coach, is I prefer to do long term. But along the way, there's a couple of things. Like we start off with the weight because it's a data point that's important, and it's a unit of measurement that's important. But over and over and over again, I have to tell people, I need you to send me your measurements. And people are like not used to taking measurements, which is so strange. And a lot of the times, I mean, I show this to a lot of people, is I'll pull up on my screen and I'll show one of my clients that started with me at 270 pounds. And right now she's 196.4. And it's really exciting to see you go under the 200. And we threw a party for her. We had like a Zoom session and all the other people came, and we did like a potluck where we were sharing our recipes and everything. And it was really fun. And so we celebrated her. But along the way, there were times when the scale didn't change for 2 or 3 weeks. And she's getting frustrated. Alex, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm eating the way I'm supposed to. I've been getting 10,000 steps a day. We started at 2,000. Now I'm at 10,000. It should be going faster. And then we look at her measurements, which maybe she hasn't sent in a couple weeks because she's just doing the scale. And it's like, oh, well, you've lost 1.5 inches around your waist and 1 inch off of your hips, but the scale hasn't changed and you're frustrated. So I think a big thing for a lot of people is we have to have a way to measure progress and prove to ourselves that it's working, that have nothing to do with the scale, because the scale is fundamentally the worst, the most inaccurate form of data when it comes to weight loss. Because when you lose fat off of your body, it's reflected by how many inches around you are, because your shape is changing and you're losing mass. But the scale is going to go up and down all day long and every single day based on how much water you're retaining, how much salt you're retaining, whether you've had a bowel movement recently or not, whether you drank alcohol the night before or not. If you're losing body fat and gaining a little bit of muscle, that's going to change the equation. There are so many things that are happening in a person's body, especially in a woman's body, where like female sex hormones are just kind of more sensitive to create those fluctuations than men. So it's completely normal for the scale to go up and down. But when we see that number and we equate our own self-esteem to that number, then we're allowing our internal state to be at the mercy of the whims of the universe. And that's why people struggle so much, is that like I don't get my sense of satisfaction and my sense of accomplishment and my gratification from the scale. I can't get that gratification from anything external. I can only get that gratification from right here. And when you start to think that way, the scale doesn't have power over you anymore, and you just keep doing the thing, because regardless of what the scale says, I feel better. I'm not having cravings anymore. I have energy. My mind is clear. My acne is going away. My inflammation's coming down, so my joints don't hurt. I can roll around in the grass with my kids and my grandkids, and I'm not in pain after. I can get back up because, I'm in better shape than I was even just a month ago, and I can actually just live my life day to day and be comfortable. And all of that stuff becomes the instant gratification. All of that stuff becomes the reward, and the instant gratification from that number going down just isn't the most important thing anymore.
I like that answer. I feel like it's hard because you don't see that as much when you're watching. So I'm just thinking about all the YouTube people that we watch, and their focus is always on the number on the scale, right? It's always like, oh, I lost this much, I lost that. Like it's always focused there. And I think it's a societal thing, to be honest. It's just like we are told that we are valued by how thin we are. So I'm a person that now I've started this process with you. I'm losing weight, but I'm also losing size, and so you're trying to focus me on all the right things. How are you feeling? How's all these things? How long do you say that it would take for someone to let go of the scale idea? Like, what are you seeing? Because that's something that when I'm working with people, it's so hard to get them to let go of the scale idea.
Yeah, it's hard. Even when I work with people I've worked with people for 6, 12, 18, 24 months, and they still don't let go of the scale idea. And especially if I think for a lot of women that are over 40 now, a lot of people have been on every diet out there since, their mom put them on Weight Watchers when they were 11, and their whole lives they've been looking at that scale for validation and for approval of like, oh, I'm doing it right. Like I'm a quote unquote normal person. And so being able to rewire that many years of reliance upon a scale is so hard to do. And I probably can't do it in a year or two, honestly. Like it's going to take them just living this lifestyle for a long time and getting to the point where they really start to see their inches coming down. And that's kind of the point where people buy into the process a little bit more. They're like, oh, like whether I lost 20 pounds or 50 pounds, my body is transformed so much that I'm starting to realize, like, okay, the inches matter. And you kind of have to see it for yourself, I think. And that's when you get to let go a little bit.
I would also add that when you're lucky enough to feel good again. And I feel like one of the major things that I see when I'm working with clients is that the shift happens when the feeling good is happening even if the weight is still there. And that shift that happens in our minds where it's like I don't get up in the morning and have to like wait a little while before I can do my stuff, or I can do an activity and not have to recover. When those kind of things start happening, and I feel like when, especially when you're talking about large amounts of weight loss, like what it sounds like you're doing with your clients, they're going to feel better before they are thinner. And I do find when we help people to look at that, as you said earlier, now all of a sudden I don't want the cookies. I don't want, because this feels amazing. And getting people to work that part of the process, I think, is huge.
Like we want to build a weight loss strategy that is actually already the lifestyle that they want to have. Like if they want to lose weight and be able to be more active and hike with people and walk their dogs, that should be the exercise that they do when they're 250 pounds. Even if it's hard at first, they can only do 10 minutes because that's what they want to do and it's in line with the future they want to have. It becomes the most sensible route to get them there. But if they're the type of person that wants to walk their dogs and hike and be in nature, and they really don't want to go to the gym, how is going to the gym the right suggestion for their exercise process to get the weight off? It doesn't align with their values or their interests or their preferences. Of course, it's not going to be sustainable. So if we can get them to start living the life that they think they have to wait for, then they start to enjoy their lives to the fullest. The number stops being the number one priority, and it's just a natural byproduct of living a healthy, active life and feeling good. The number just comes with time, and they don't feel so deprived and like so impatient to get there that they're constantly looking at their watch and counting the seconds until they get to be done, right?
Enjoying your exercise. I mean, honestly, like it's one of the things that I have to say. And again, exercise is not for weight loss. It's like this thing again that we're trying to. It's the thing we do to be healthy. But I can tell you that I don't go to the gym except to use the red light machine. So I do feel like finding those things that you do, like climbing. I know that you said you're a climber too. Um, Longboarding, skiing, all the things that we love to do that get us outside and being active and having fun with it. How are you going to do something forever that you don't have fun with? Which goes back to the whole question. Well, I asked you the question about food is whatever food you're choosing that you're going to be eating that forever, then choose appropriately. Like we're put on diets where we're eating stuff we can't stand, so we will lose weight. How will you sustain that? There's a lot of ideas that you and I are helping people to break through if you want to be healthy forever. I want to talk now about like what have you actually improved for yourself, because there's a list and it's quite impressive.
Yeah, it's every nagging chronic health issue that I had that most people seem to have. I had a cystic acne that would just leak down my face all the time, and I had sleep apnea that I had a machine for, and I had high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and constant joint pain and chronic migraines. They were awful. I'd just be in bed like practically screaming in pain, and you know my back hurt. It was hard to bend over and tie my shoes. I'd get out of breath like climbing a flight of stairs, which was really humiliating. I had, oh my gosh, like there's so much, it's just everything you can imagine, everything that everybody has these days, um, all those nagging health issues, and also just the big scary metabolic diseases. Within 11 months of my food plan, I went to the doctor and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're like in perfect health. We've never seen anybody so healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, come back in a year because we're not worried about you." And it was almost entirely just through changing how I ate.
So you went from every disease to 11 months later, the picture of health. And I'm wondering, the knee pain, the back pain, the all this joint stuff. Had you had any treatments for this acne? Like all these things that you had going on, gout. I see here on the list. Had you had treatments for these things in the years where you were still eating anything?
No, it was all
No.
through food.
Okay, so just living with it, suffering through it.
Oh, I mean, before I had lost the weight, yeah, like I had to go to sleep specialist to try to figure out the sleep apnea. I would have gout attacks that were like weeks at a time where my ankle was so swollen I couldn't even stand on it or put weight on it. So it was a lot of misery, a lot of nights in bed screaming for migraines, and nothing seemed to help. And the only thing that helped was actually eating better and getting rid of the inflammation and getting the weight off. And then it all just kind of went away on its own.
And the depression? How long were you in that state?
Oh, that was most of my life. Yeah. And probably a little, throughout the weight loss journey, I was probably still a little bit depressed, which might have been an advantage because I didn't like go out. I wasn't a super social person, so I didn't have those temptations. And even if I had, even when I did go out, like that wasn't, I didn't hang out in that part of the party, right? I went and talked to my friends instead of staying by the snack table like I used to. So everything got better very quickly once I changed my value system around food. And I mean, it's not perfect. I've still got to work on a lot of flexibility because, over the years of being so overweight, like just the way that my hips are and everything is, it's going to be a process to tone myself back up and get myself into the best shape. But I don't have most of those chronic nagging things are completely gone, other than like, I still seem to have like, I don't know if it's early onset arthritis or just my joints are still, I guess, a little bit shot from years of how much weight was on them. So I still have to be careful with those. But for the most part, I'm, the doctors just don't see anything there anymore. Got rid of cured fatty liver, reversed diabetes, right?
So you mentioned friends. I'm wondering, what were your friends' reactions to what you're doing, and has it impacted the relationships?
Well, everybody's just so proud of me. And they're like, gosh, I can remember when you were big and like you didn't have a lot of confidence and you didn't want to come out and hang out with us because you'd always make excuses. And we knew that you were just kind of feeling shy that day and didn't want to be around people. And now I can kind of just do whatever I want. And I don't feel limited. I don't like if I don't want to go somewhere, it's because I don't want to go. And it's not because I'm afraid that they're going to see me. If I stay home, it's because I really just, I feel like being by myself and being introverted. And it's not because I feel like I have to hide. And so the weight off of my psyche is the burden that used to be there is just gone now, which is it's just such a relief. I can just kind of go through life and just feel comfortable in my own skin now.
Has your lifestyle change impacted people in your immediate family, friend circle?
Yeah, I think I've inspired a lot of my friends to eat a bit healthier. My family struggles. It's pretty unfortunate. My two brothers are very addicted to sugar, and they know what I'm all about, and they haven't been able to break free yet. It's a work in progress. And my grandma, ironically, uh, even though when I was younger, she taught me a lot of good things. As she got older, and she was a very stubborn person and like wanted to be independent all the way till the end and wouldn't let anybody help her. So she was relying on the processed, convenient food, and that only made it worse because as she was getting older and less mobile, she was gaining weight, and the inflammation was in her brain, and that's like Alzheimer's, and the cognitive decline is type 3 diabetes. And I'm sure that that's what got her, is that she put all the sugar back in her system for convenience, and she lost her mind. And so she passed away. And my mom had bariatric surgery to try to deal with her health problems. And she recently had complications from that surgery, like a year later, and went into the hospital with stomach pain. And 48 hours later, she was gone. Her intestines died, and she couldn't get nutrition, and they couldn't really do anything about it. And so, I've seen it hurt a lot of people's families, metabolic disease, and it's impacting my family too. Even though I got it together in myself, I feel bad that maybe I was too late, and I couldn't help my family more. But I'm doing the best I can to be a good role model and to help the people that are ready.
I I'm so sorry to hear about your mother and grandmother. Um, I think myself as included, I've had people that I've lost that I thought, oh wow, if I would have known earlier. And then you talk to the people that are still here, and it's like, okay, everybody has their own path they're going to walk, and some people are not ready. And I feel like it's so hard though, because when you have this information, you just want to put it in everybody else's head, and it's not possible. And it's hurtful a little bit because, like, we know how much it would help them, but yeah, I really hope that there's a day soon where this is not a conversation anymore of people leaving because of the food they're eating. That would make me very happy.
Yeah, I think that's a goal that a lot of us have, is to try to educate people or to inspire people so that, you know, I mean, one of my, my big why is to help people so that they can just break the generational curse. You know, it's like don't let your kids go down this route. Don't let their kids go down this route. 50 years from now, like let's all get it together and be healthy and be active and do the right thing so that, our kids don't end up going through the pain that we went through and feeling so bad about themselves and getting bullied in high school and doubting that anybody could ever love them, and like this awful stuff that goes through our heads when we're big and when we're mistreated. Let's do what we have to do now so that we don't, like, you know keep passing those burdens on generation after generation.
What's frustrating is that a lot of the bullying and the negative emotional things that we live end up coming from society putting these ideas in other people. Like, you know what? It's really frustrating to me that the number of people that I've met, myself included, I've had so much love around me growing up. And then when I did gain weight, like the love was still there. But there's this stuff that we internalize from what we learned when I was thinner, like the ideas I had about why people are overweight, which is so not true. And then when you become overweight, you're putting it on yourself, and not only to find out, like, it's so crazy how just not knowing a few pieces of information is the difference between living a happy life and not living a happy life.
It's definitely something that I wish I learned a lot earlier. If somebody had framed it to me that, hey, there are certain foods that are drugs.
Today's video is brought to you by my keto consultations. You know how to do keto, but you're having trouble just sticking with it? Book a consultation with me and we're going to get you back on track. The link is in the description.
Hey, there are certain foods that are drugs, and this is what you're gonna feel like if you do them, and it'll taste nice and it'll feel good, but you're gonna have no energy and you're gonna have no motivation, and your skin is gonna look bad and your joints are gonna ache and you're not ever gonna be able to stop thinking about it, and you're not gonna want to go play with your friends or do anything else other than sit there and eat sugar. Then I would have had a different outlook about it, uh, and I could have avoided a lot of the pain and the heartache and the frustration and the poor health and missing out on experiences and opportunities because I was just shut in my room. But I didn't get to learn about that stuff as a kid. Fortunately, I did when I was in my 20s, rather than, because a lot of people, they don't learn about this stuff till they're in their 50s or 60s, and they've missed out on a lot. Kids and grandkids and vacations to Disney World where they couldn't keep up, and it's really sad. And so I'm very glad that I figured it out when I did. And I still wish that all of us had figured it out a long time ago. And so now it's time to figure it out and to learn more about it and to learn what's not healthy and what is healthy, and not just about the food, because I think that's the easy part. It's actually a pretty cut and dry science. Like when you look into it and you start to understand, like, how does my metabolism work? What are the different components of energy burn? How much protein do people generally need? And it's a lot more than they tell you on keto. Because we got to remember as well, the keto ratios of extremely high fat, moderate protein, and low carb are meant for epileptic children. They're not meant for a woman over 40 that needs significantly more protein to make up for the muscle loss, right? So just like the scientific principles are pretty sound if you can dig through the internet noise and actually get to.
One of the things that I'm constantly saying is that we don't know what the definition of keto is. Because the definition of keto is eat less than 20 grams of carbs, period. There's nothing else to say. And we complicate it. Well, the internet has complicated it so they can sell us products. Because we need MCT oil and we need keto bombs and all kinds of stuff. We need a special keto cookbook. We don't need any of those things. We just need to know that 20 grams of carbs is the max that a healthy person can manage in a day. We probably can't manage that because we have metabolic syndrome. Most of the people walking through the planet. And it's really just getting that piece of information into everybody's hands, right? If we don't complicate things, then everything else is normal, right? We should be eating a normal amount of fat for our body and a normal amount of protein for our body, and is figuring out how much fat and protein your particular body needs. But I do feel that even in the keto world, companies have put their fingers in and pushed us towards this idea of make it as complicated as possible so that they can't do it, right? And if we let them do that to us, we're going to go down that rabbit hole. Because that's what I do believe is happening. So we've let that happen.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that, where it's like the food industry will sell us things that make us fat, and then the fitness industry will sell us things to try to make us thinner that will stop working and frustrate us, and then we'll go back to food for comfort. And it's all, I bet they're working together. I bet they have like a cycle that they planned out for us.
Don't forget the health industry that comes in, and there's medications and surgeries and right. It doesn't stop just between the diet world and the food world. Like they're all working together. It's crazy that we have taken this long to figure this out.
Yeah, and that's why the only people that seem to really be successful and that seem to be effective are the dropouts, right? They're the people that are like, you know what? I don't like this system. I'm not going to participate anymore. I'm not going to follow the food industry, and I'm not going to buy the products, and I'm not going to buy into the quick, beach body trends, which are really just about burning as much fat and muscle as possible so that your scale goes down so they can give a before and after. They don't care about your long-term metabolic health or metabolic adaptation or how you're going to bounce back and regain all the weight and then some. They just want to get you skinny for their pictures. So like all of these people don't really have our best interests at heart. And if we let go of all the stuff that we're reading about and listening about, like just like eat a steak with some vegetables and like a little bit of olive oil on your salad, or just do carnivore and don't overthink it too much, and it tends to work out really wonderfully. And then when people offer you food at a party and they're pushing it on you, and your inner people pleaser wants to come out, you just gotta remind yourself, I don't get my safety and my security and my approval from placating other people. I get my approval from right here. And the thing that I need to do for approval is to not poison my body, just to take the pressure off of them not being happy that I'm saying no. Like that's the kind of mindset that helps us to sustain this change. And it's deeper than just eat fat and protein. Just don't eat sugar. There's a lot of deeper stuff that I tend to work with people on. It's like we figure out the food in the first week or two, and then it's a year of like breaking all of these stories that have been repeating so that they stop doing that to themselves. So it's the deeper work that's got to eventually happen too.
And I would also add to that, it's the deeper work of believing that you need to please other people. There's a reality that if I say no thank you, it doesn't matter why I'm saying no thank you. It's not your business really why I'm saying no thank you. If I don't want it, why would I eat it? And whether it's a piece of cake or a piece of steak, it doesn't matter. If I don't want it, I don't want it. I feel like we need to be confident in ourselves that I don't have to explain myself all the time. This is another thing from that world out there that says that, oh, you're not doing that. You need to tell me why. No, I don't. Especially as an adult, I don't need to tell you why. So I really encourage everyone to just realize that if you made a decision for yourself that you know is healthy for yourself, someone else understanding it isn't really the point because they're not the ones that has to do it. Like, we are the ones that have to do it.
Yeah, I think that beyond the sort of scientific skills of understanding metabolism and understanding the different hormones that play into fat loss and energy metabolism, those are things that you can just kind of like you can just study them, and they're out there on the internet, right? The more important things for weight management are life skills like being able to communicate effectively and to be able to set boundaries and understanding how to process failure as a learning lesson rather than as a judgment about yourself. And like these are the things that they're so important as a human for weight loss or anything else in life that are not taught to most of us as kids. And a big breakthrough for me was like it's not so much about the food. There's definitely a right way and a wrong way to eat for the human body. But once you know what that is, it's actually so simple that it's incredibly boring. It's like, well, you just eat meat and vegetables if they agree with you, and then like other than that, like there's not a lot out there in the store that you have to concern yourself with, right? So once you get the food really simple, it's like, okay, well now the real fun begins because now I unravel all of the crap that's been fed to me for 30, 40, 50, 60 years and learn how to be okay living in a world where all of those old stories and all of those coping mechanisms are no longer needed. And that's the hard stuff. That's why most people aren't successful even when they basically have it right and they sort of know what they should do. They just have such a hard time getting themselves to do it.
Well, and as you just said, it's like all those coping mechanisms, right? Like, the truth of the matter is, we're often eating food because we're upset, or because we're happy, or because we're some other kind of emotion, and not because we're hungry. And we're using food as friends, and we're using foods as answers to things that it's not supposed to answer. And I feel like when we stop and recognize that food is supposed to build and fuel my body, period. And anytime I'm trying to use food for something other than building and fueling, I'm making a mistake. And it's a mistake that I'm making because I was taught to make that mistake. So don't get mad at myself about it. It's not about being mad. It's about seeing the mistake and doing better. And as soon as that piece of information becomes the thing that you just know, eating the right foods becomes obvious. Because if I'm hungry, I eat a meal. If I'm not going to eat a meal, there's no reason to eat. And I think it's the logic that our grandparents and our great grandparents and our great great grandparents used, and somehow we even invented this stupid snack idea, and we're grazing 24/7. And we really need to walk away from that.
That's a really big problem that I see in a lot of people. And being able to manage our time and being able to be okay with putting ourselves first and actually sitting down to have a meal instead of working through lunch because like we feel like we have to give 100% to work, right? It's such a simple thing, but so many people struggle because they don't put enough nutrition into their body regularly enough throughout the day. And not everybody does well with fasting, like especially women. It can be a lot harder for women. Their female hormones are
Especially what? Did you say women?
fasting is really hard for a lot of women because the the instinct for survival can be a little bit more sensitive. And so if there's a lot of undereating going on, I think in men, like men's metabolism is kind of typically faster because we're larger on average. But for women, if it starts to get, if they're undereating, they're not getting enough vitamins, and the body can kind of rebel a little bit against. Uh,
Oof, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. I think we're going to disagree on that one because I do one meal a day easily. And I feel like a lot of people have trouble with fasting because they're still letting a lot of carb in, and they're still allowing their bodies to have those little moments of spiking happening. So I feel like every person needs to really, and it's not that we need to fast either, because if as long as you're giving your body healthy food, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. But what I will say is that when we're eating healthily and we're giving our body what it needs, it shouldn't be chasing food all the time. Like, especially if you have repairs to be done, which most of us who are overweight have repairs to be done. So I don't know. I really struggle when I hear people say that women have more trouble fasting than men, when we came from the same background where we would not have had food for the same length of time, because if the animal wasn't caught, neither of us were eating. So I struggle with that idea.
Yeah, I think it's just a case by case basis. And, there's a lot of women who are going to do totally fine with fasting, and there's a lot of men that are not going to do so great with fasting. And I think that has more to do with whatever's going on internally versus just a gender thing. I think that I've just seen on average that, like, women's bodies, like, and the way that it was, because I'm not a woman, of course, so we have to take that with a grain of salt. But the way that it was explained to me was, for women to be able to carry a child, the the balance within has to be protected. And so if we're under eating, if there's not enough nutrition, the body is a little bit more sensitive to that, because it doesn't want to have that food scarcity, or that like a lack of nutrition, because it wouldn't be good for the baby. So there's kind of like for some, and it might also be an age thing, kind of depending, maybe in the younger years where babies are a little bit more that's more likely to happen. Like, maybe that those people are, like, during a person's period, for example, it can be a lot harder to fast. So it kind of depends on, like, the hormonal state and where a person is at. But that seems to be the average, is that fasting fasting should be a tool and not a rule, right? If it makes sense for you with where you're at, and if it works for your body, then it can be really helpful. But I've also seen a lot of people really try to enforce it on themselves and think that they're supposed to do it and they should only do one meal a day, when maybe, with their level of activity, and maybe they've got more energy output, more calorie burn, due to how active they are, that makes sense to do 2 meals a day.
I would also add, if that's where you're getting that data from, I'm going to add to that that yes, there are a lot of women who are, because of society, believing they're supposed to be thin tomorrow, and therefore they're going to do keto, and they're going to do low fat keto, and they're going to do low fat keto fasting, and they're going to keep calories in, calories out, and they're going to try to do all the things because they're focused on weight loss more so than they're focused on health. And yes, in that story, I've heard women talk about how hard it is to fast because they're trying to force their body to fast
Yeah.
rather than allow their body to get to a place where it's ready to fast, which is two different things. And I feel like when women allow themselves to, take their time and get to the place where they're actually in ketosis and their body is actually starting to heal, fasting becomes easy if they want to do it. Again, not something that we need
Right.
to do. Totally agree with that. Same way that we don't need to work out, right? Healthy to work out, but you know what I mean? So like it's one of those things where I feel, and the reason I'm pushing back on this a little bit is because all too often the propaganda comes in and says, "Oh, but you're a woman, so you need this and you need that." And it's like, "No, I'm a human, and as a human, my body is able to fast." Now, psychologically, am I ready to fast? A whole other conversation. But is my body able to fast? 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what it really comes down to, is that we we want to have the ability and the self trust to make nuanced decisions for ourselves, that are driven by, like, what makes sense for me as a person, rather than, an influencer on the internet said that I should do XYZ. It's like, well, okay, like, I tried to do that and it didn't feel good. And so it's not that I'm bad or that I'm doing something wrong. It's that maybe something else would work a little better for me. So I think if we have that kind of mindset towards things, we can be open-minded about all the different styles out there, and, oh, maybe I could try carnivore, maybe I could do this way. I've even been open-minded and being like, well, what if I did vegan, and let's see how that would feel, because I've done carnivore already and I don't like vegan as much. And so I've kind of, through the willingness to experiment and go through the process of elimination, I've built a lot of confidence and a lot of trust in myself that I know what's right for my body, because it's experiential and I'm not relying on other people to make that decision for me. And so that's something that I think is really empowering for a lot of people, to kind of experiment and to try a lot of things, and to know that it's not going to like ruin your body. Like, you're not going to mess anything up. You can bounce back and you can try something else. But it lets you see, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. And that's a really important thing when you're trying to figure out the way of eating that you can sustain and that actually gets you the best results.
I also think it helps that we have so much data. Like we can look at experiments and research that we have going back to 1800s, and it's like there's all this data that shows that they started to see where, as we were eating more and more carb, our health was changing. So it's not something that started, like, it's not something that wasn't being documented as it was happening. And I feel like that also helps, because it helps us to have confidence in what we think we're seeing now, which is that since about 1970, our weight has been skyrocketing, which is around the time the fat is making you fat thing started. So there's a lot of information that helps us to be focused in the right direction. Right. So I'm really excited for the changes that I hope are coming because I think more and more people like us are having these kind of conversations where it's like other people who are not as involved in low carb eating can kind of watch a conversation and say, okay, there are things that I could be doing that might help my health.
Opening our minds and hearing what works for other people, getting the inspiration is really important, because if we've struggled for a long time and if we failed everything we've ever done, and then we learn something that worked for somebody else and we've never done that thing, the more we can share and the more we can talk about what helped us change things, the more people realize that they can do it too. And so that's the big message that I try to tell everybody is, I was 400 pounds. I had every health issue out there. I was wildly addicted to sugar, and I was binge eating every single night, and I turned it all around, because humans have the remarkable ability to change. We're the only animal that can like redirect ourselves and go, oh, I don't like this about myself. I'm going to do this better. And so everybody's capable of change. But if you don't believe it and if you don't do the work, you're always going to be on a diet.
That's an amazing point. If you don't believe in yourself, you're just going to keep yo-yo dieting. Wow. Okay.
They're so afraid of disappointment that they'll put 70% into everything. And I hear people tell me this all the time. They're like, I'd be happy just to lose 50 pounds. And I have to go deeper and go, well, how much would you actually want to lose? And they go, well, 100, but like, I'd settle for 50. It's like, well, there's your problem. You need to stop settling. You deserve better, and so do your kids. They deserve a mom that has energy to play with them after work. And if you lose 50 pounds and you've got 50 more that's dragging you down, and you still don't like the way that you look, you don't want to be in pictures with your kids, you still don't have enough energy, you're still in too much pain to run around with them, they're not getting your best. They deserve better, and so do you. And so we've got to set our sights a little bit higher than we have in the past. And the thing is, if we believe that we can do it and we stop holding ourselves back, and we take action with the level of energy that's required to lose 100 pounds, not the energy to lose 50, then we lose the 100 pounds instead of 50 and then backsliding, because that's the point where we stop having confidence, right? So it's a tough thing, and a lot of us don't have a ton of evidence of success to draw from to make us feel like we can do it. And so for me, I think the way that I broke through that was, I'm gonna behave according to who I want to be, not who I've been, because who I've been has failed and has given up and has taken the easy way out, and you know all of this stuff that I don't feel very good about. But the person that I want to be never gives up, and the person that I want to be doesn't cheat, and the person that I want to be doesn't say yes to everybody else at his own expense. And so that's the identity shift that I think helps people finally break through after decades.
I love that. I feel like we will learn so much from being the person that we want to be. right? Because you can't do something if you don't believe in yourself that you can do it. That's just basic, right? We have to believe in ourselves. And the next step is, once I believe I'm going to do it, I turn around and I do it. So it's making the belief into an action and following through, right? The truth is, the point is to prioritize health every single day, right? And to eat healthy every single day, right? When you're eating, it's a meal. So I love that we're going to end on this note, because I think it's the best thing that people can do is believe in themselves, get out there, find a coach like you, and start doing something, right? Like we do this because we want to help people to get better. So where can they find you? How do they get in touch with you if they want some coaching from you, Alex?
Well, I just do a free Facebook group. It's called Sugar Free Weight Loss Tips over on Facebook. And we have like some video guides that I walk people through. We do challenges. We just did a 7-day sugar free challenge. And I walked people through actually being aware of the good habits, like, how to eat better, how to exercise a little bit more, how to sleep better, how to manage your stress, how to do all these different things that support recovery from cravings and self sabotage. And so we do a lot of fun little events like that. And then, once in a while I'll meet a person that really needs a lot of help, and then we can kind of talk about like building out a plan for them, and then we go from there.
That's terrific. So I'm going to put that link in the description. Thank you very much for joining. Wellness Warriors, if you want to get started on your keto carnivore lifestyle, click on the link that's on the screen right here so you can get started. Talk to you next week.